ويكشف السوء عما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. So again, just as a reminder, Sister Hanna on the ladies' side will handle the voter registration. On the gents' side will be Brother Mujahid and myself. Please see one of us. We request a Surah Fatiha is requested for Marhum Akbar A.M. Jafar, as well as all the marhumeen in our families and all over the world. Surah Al-Mubarakat Al-Fatiha. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. One final programming announcement. The Ashura Day program email will be sent out tomorrow, but just as a placeholder, the Amal on the day of Ashura on Wednesday will begin at 9:30 a.m. at the center, inshallah. So we hope to see everybody at the center at 9:30 a.m. The full details of the program of the Amal will be sent out by tomorrow on email, inshallah. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome Sheikh Murtaza Bachoo with a loud salawat. ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. صل على محمد وآل محمد. One more time, one loud salawat for Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Salawat. صل على محمد وآل محمد.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين بارئ الخلائق أجمعين باعث الأنبياء والمرسلين ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا وحبيب قلوبنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين. أما بعد، السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. We are nearing the day of Ashura, and we are grieved by the tragedy that transpired on the day of Ashura. And so let us begin tonight and prepare our hearts for that day and renew our allegiance to Imam al-Hussein and the movement of Imam al-Hussein by sending our salams to him and his family and his companions. Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdillah wa ala al-arwah allati hallat bifina'ik alayka minni salamullah أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. Last night we discussed the important topic of poverty, and we talked about our collective responsibility towards uprooting poverty. And the important point that we made last night is that Islam's primary solution to uprooting poverty is not charity. It is not sadaqah, it is not zakat, it is not khums, even though that is a part of the solution. Islam's primary solution is social equality and social justice. And we say that there's a difference between giving charity and advocating for social justice. When we give charity and only charity, we are accepting the environment and the conditions that lead to systemic poverty. But when we advocate for social equality and social justice, We are challenging that environment. We are changing that environment, and we're trying to change those conditions that lead to systemic poverty. And the reason for challenging it is to return dignity and honor back to the lives of the people. We also made another important point last night. We said that it's important for us as a Muslim community to talk about those issues which are of relevance to us, issues that affect us, and we are able to affect them as well. And let us not be a distracted community. So tonight I want to pick on another issue which is of importance to us. It is of importance to you as Americans. It is of importance to you as Muslims. And it is important to you as human beings. And that is the topic of racism. It has become an important discussion in American society. From Trayvon Martin to Michael Brown and to other young black males who have been killed by law enforcement officers and by others, it has become an important discussion within American society. Okay? It's an important discussion in the media, and there are important conversations coming to light. The society is now talking about racial divides and how to go about racial healing. And the discussion is not limited to that either. We are now talking about how people are stereotyped, how they are marginalized, how they are excluded from communal spaces, and the impact that it has on their lives. And by no means is it only an American problem. Okay? It's a global problem as well. And it's an issue that faces the Muslim community at a global level. From the way that Afghan refugees are treated when they are outside their countries, to the way that Indian workers are treated in Gulf countries. Sometimes when I look at the burjs that are built in Dubai, I cannot think of a greater monstrosity in human society. It has been built through modern-day slavery, the exploitation of workers who come from the Indian subcontinent, living in abject conditions to be able to build what we consider to be so beautiful. Okay? And it's done by companies and large corporations who are led by people who consider themselves to be Muslims. And it's also an issue for the American Muslim community as well. We still find that black people are finding it difficult to find a space in some Muslim communities. That there are still ethnic tensions and racial tensions within certain Muslim communities as well. And that's the topic that we want to touch upon today. Okay? Racism is a real issue in the 21st century. It strips people, like poverty, it strips people of their dignity. It is one of the causes of poverty. When we have discrimination and marginalization, it is one of those systemic causes of poverty. And it leads to segregation, and it leads to exclusion, and it leads to isolation, and it leads to other issues as well. So we want to analyze this issue by answering 3 questions. The first question is, what is racism, and how does racism manifest itself? Sometimes manifestations of racism are very subtle. Secondly, what is Islam's view on racism and having racial pride? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created us in different races and different tribes. When a person becomes a Muslim, do they have to lose their racial identity, their ethnic identity, their nationalistic identity? Can a person be proud of their racial identity or not? Okay. And the third question that we want to look at is, what is our responsibility in combating racism? Whether that's within our community or within our society, What are certain practical responsibilities that we have that we can carry out in our communities? So inshallah we'll get started with the salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So racism occurs when a group believes that it is superior than another group because of the color of their skin or the race from which they come from. And it stems from racial prejudice. And racial prejudice comes about when we develop a derogatory or inferior attitude towards people based on their race or based on the color of their skin. And you find that this narrative has always been there. That people are superior or inferior on the basis of the color of their skin. This idea seems to be there in human society. That a person is more beautiful based on the color of their skin. And today's cosmetic industry is firmly entrenched and surviving because of that idea. Having people of fair skin or being of fair skin is more beautiful. Or the idea that people who are of fair skin or lighter skin or whiter skin are more smarter and more intelligent than people of darker skin. And you find that this idea has been there for a long time. Even in American society, before the American Civil War, when the southern states used to have plantations and they would make slaves work in the plantations, the darker slaves were chosen to work on the plantations, in the farms, and the lighter colored slaves were chosen to work in the houses, to serve as servants, because it was assumed that they would be smarter. And you find that such narratives are also found within the Muslim community as well, before we go too far. Yeah? You find that in some of our countries, where we depict the picture or the image of an imam, in some countries they do that, they will normally depict him as a person of fair skin and white skin. And they may even consider it to be an aib, a defect, a flaw, to depict the imam of having darker skin or a darker complexion. Whereas we know that the imams, they were Arabs, they lived in Arabia, they lived in the desert lands, they toiled over there, they worked under the sun, they worked in the farms, and it must have been natural for them to have a darker complexion. Or at least we don't know exactly what was their complexion. In the case of some of our imams, though, we know that their mother was from North Africa. And they were known to have a darker complexion. And their children would also have had a darker complexion. And yet drawing such an image may sometimes be considered to be an aib. Okay? And you even find the same sort of thinking within the Indian subcontinent as well. Now some of you may ask that why are we airing our dirty laundry in public? And airing it when it's being aired live, and it will go on the website as well. Okay. But these are the issues that we're facing. These are the issues that divide our communities and divide our societies. If we don't talk about these issues from the pulpit, then what do we talk about from the pulpit? And if this pulpit is not supposed to deal with these issues and give us real solutions and help us to recognize our biases and our prejudices, then who is supposed to do that? And what is supposed to do that? Is it people outside? And we're supposed to look for solutions from people outside and look up to them? Or is this platform supposed to provide the solutions? Now you find that when the colonialists came to the Indo-Pak subcontinent, right, they brought their ideas with them as well. And they colonized the lands, and they also colonized the minds as well. And when they left from the lands, but they have still not left from the minds. Their ideas still continue to remain within us. Today, when you look at the contemporary state of certain communities, you cannot but help to realize that a lot of that is still remnants of colonialist ideas. When the colonialists came to our lands, they also brought this idea with them, that being of fair skin means that you're smarter, you're more intelligent, you're more beautiful, and being of dark skin means quite the opposite. And therefore you find that even a person like Gandhi was affected by it. And Gandhi has some very racist statements that by today's standards we would call him a racist. Okay? And this is openly available. I have said before that human beings are not perfect. People are not black and white. They do good, but they also have their flaws as well. And this was one of his flaws. If you read up on some of the statements that he has made, you would find them shocking. And these are not hidden statements by any means. If we choose to ignore them, that's a different issue. Where he believed that Indians were equal to white people, but that black people who lived in South Africa were far superior to the Indians and the white people. So the idea of racism and that some people may be superior to others on the basis of their race or the color of their skin is something that you find prevalent within our societies. Racism is also based on stereotypes. When we take a truth, an exaggerated truth, and we apply it to every member of a particular community or a member of a particular ethnic background. And then every time we meet a person from that background, we assume and pass judgment on them based on those racial stereotypes that we have created. For example, when Trayvon Martin was killed by George Zimmerman, and George Zimmerman was taken to court, his defense in court was to say that when I saw a young African American wearing a hoodie and walking alone in the darkness of the night, I assumed that this person was going to be aggressive, this person was going to be violent, and therefore I responded by using my gun. That's a racial stereotype. It's a racial stereotype that is there today, where when we look at somebody without even knowing that person, without even seeing their behavior, because racial stereotypes do not allow for social and individual variance. Right? Without looking at that person's behavior, he had already decided that this person was going to be violent and aggressive, and he had to respond in that manner. Right? And that's an issue that should concern us, because this culture of stereotyping actually affects the Muslim community as well. And there's an article in Time magazine, a Christian pastor wrote that article over there, and they mentioned something very interesting. They say, well, let's think about this. When you see a group of white young men breaking and vandalizing the streets of a city after a game of sports, after a hockey game is lost, or after a basketball game is lost, what does the media say about them? The media says that these were young people, they were reveling, and they went out of control, and it was just a one-time thing that they have done. Then she says, well, think about it. What if those people, instead of being white, were black? Young black people going out on the streets, vandalizing and breaking things on the streets. How does the media depict them? As aggressive, as dangerous, as thugs. So what difference does it make? Well, the media will normally say that, look, these young white males were just being silly. Let's give them a slap on the wrist and let them go back to their communities. But when it's black people, well, they're dangerous. They're aggressive. And we need to make sure that they stay behind bars. Right? That's racial stereotyping. It has real consequences to people's lives. It has real consequences to their communities. Right? Now, why should we care as a Muslim community? Because the same racial stereotyping that happens to them, it happens to us as well. And I want you to appreciate a statement I'm going to make over here. Right? That Islamophobia is actually a form of racism. And if we want to uproot Islamophobia, we have to start at the roots of it. We have to be part of a group that's going to combat racism. Right? We have to remove that racism from within our societies. Last year, there was a person who went and shot up an abortion clinic. Yeah? And he killed about 9 to 14 people there, injured some more. He was a white person. And he considered himself to be a Christian. And he used to quote the Bible significantly. But yet when he went and did that, nobody talked about his faith. Right? Nobody talked about his religion. They all said, the media told us, that he had a mental health issue. Okay. Right? And yes, nobody should be talking about their religion. And nobody should be blaming the religion for the actions of one person. Fair enough. But look at the racial stereotyping that Muslims face. Then the same thing happens after a couple of months in San Bernardino, and then this year later on in Orlando. And nobody comes and says, well, if he was a Muslim, maybe it was a mental health issue. Because the media has racially stereotyped us. If it was a Muslim, then it is because he's a radical. Because he's a terrorist. Because he's an extremist. Or because it is of his faith. Okay? So, racial stereotyping is a concern that we have. Now, racism also manifests itself in many ways. Okay? It manifests itself in the form of segregation. You know that schools in the States were segregated up until the 1950s, I believe up until 1958, when there was a Supreme Court ruling that said that segregation is no longer acceptable. Buses were segregated until Rosa Parks and some of the other activists decided to take a stance against that. Even washrooms were segregated in American society, and Americans have come a long way after that. You find that racism also leads to exclusion within organizations, within clubs, within places. Racism leads to discrimination in laws and policies. And racism leads to marginalization. It marginalizes a group's struggles. It marginalizes their perspectives. It marginalizes their challenges. It marginalizes their experiences as well. Okay? And what do I mean by that? I'm going to be giving you some examples today. I don't expect you to agree with them or to disagree with them. I'm just hoping to start a conversation. I expect that you will think about them. Okay? So, a couple of years ago, or last year, there was the Chapel Hill shooting in North Carolina, okay, where 3 people, Dia Barakat, Yusur, and Razan, were killed by a person who was Islamophobic and who had threatened to kill them. And there was an outpour of grief. There was an outpour of grief from the whole Muslim community, whether they were in America or they were in Canada. Even in Canada, we went out, we had candlelight vigils. We wrote letters of support, we wrote letters of condemnation. Okay? Now there's a very interesting article on Al Jazeera. And I'm quoting this article not because I'm wanting to promote Al Jazeera, but just because the article appears there. And the article is titled very interestingly, it's titled, "The Color of Muslim Mourning." And it's written by an associate professor and an adjunct professor. The color of Muslim mourning. Okay? They ask a very interesting question over there. They say that, look, before these 3 were killed, the day before, there was a Somali Muslim who was also killed in an Islamophobic attack in Canada. And yet, there was no outpour of grief. There was no awareness that was raised. It was only left between and within the Somali Muslim community. In fact, they point out that after the shootings and the killings, when Dia was holding, before he passed away, he had a particular charity. People donated in significant amounts to it. After he passed away, they were able to collect $380,000. But when it comes to this Somali Muslim, Mustafa Matan, who was killed a day before the Chapel Hill shootings, his family was not even able to raise $15,000 for his burial. Okay. Now you will say, well, that's because he was Canadian and Americans are more interested in what is American. Well, they point out that there have been many such examples in America as well. How come we have not commemorated that? And how come we have not shown the same level of support as we showed to this brother and these sisters who passed away? So they have a statement in there, and their statement states, and I just want you to think about this. I don't want you to accept it or to reject it. They say, in life and in death, Arab and South Asian Muslim lives seem to matter far more than the lives of black Muslims. And that's the end of the quote. Okay? Racism has real effects. It marginalizes the experiences, the suffering, and the challenges which are faced by a particular group. The last point I want to make about racism is that it can also be subtle. That sometimes it is very subconscious. That even people who want to be good people and they have good morals may sometimes still may still engage in a racist behavior. Now, there's a professor from the University of Columbia. His name is Darrell Wing Su, and he termed a new statement. He termed it as microaggression. So racism can also take the form of microaggression. And he said microaggression is those statements that we make, those slights that we have, those verbal slights, the verbal cues, or sometimes the physical reaction that we have towards people of color and towards people who have been marginalized within their societies. And he says that sometimes it happens from good people who don't realize that these statements do hurt other people. Okay? And he says, therefore, sometimes it can even come in the form of compliments. Okay? And that's why it's really important for us to be vigilant of our biases, to always be asking ourselves, are these statements that we're making fair statements? Okay? Says, for example, when a new immigrant comes, and he meets with a person, and at the end of the discussion, that person says to him, "Ma, you speak really good English." Okay? What have you done to that person? You wanted to compliment him, but now you have told him that, well, you're not completely a part of our society, and you've made him feel insecure, and you've also made him feel marginalized as well. Right? That as if he has a point to prove, or he still has a long ways to go until he's able to be accepted as a part of the society. So these are the forms that racism can take. Which brings us now to the second question. What does Islam say about racism? And can a person be proud of the race that he comes from and be proud of his ethnicity? When the Prophet of Allah came to the people of Arabia, he found that they were in different tribes and they were in different races. In their tribes, they had their own dialects, they had their own histories, they had their own slogans, they had their own dressing, right? They had their own communities. Right? And the Prophet of Allah saw that they were proud of their tribes as well. Now when Islam comes to them, what is the expectation that Islam has for them? When a person becomes a Muslim, do they have to lose their racial identity? It's an even greater question. When a person becomes a Muslim, do they have to lose their nationalistic identity as well? In other words, can a person be a Muslim and an American? Can they be a Muslim and a Canadian? Can they be a Muslim and an Indian as well at the same time? Or no, once you become a Muslim, you must lose all of your identities except for your Islamic identity. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, Ya ayyuhan nas, O mankind, Inna khalaqnakum min dhakarin wa untha. We have created you from one man and from one woman, from Adam and Hawa. وَجَعَلْنَاكُمْ شُعُوبًا وَقَبَائِلَ لِتَعَارَفُوا. And we have placed you within tribes and clans. Shu'ub is the plural of sha'ab. And sha'ab refers to a nation. A group of people who share the same geography, who share the same land. And qaba'il refers to qabila. Qabila meaning tribe. They share the same customs. Right? They share the same race or the color of skin. Right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, we have placed you into tribes and clans. Right? Being of different races, being of different tribes is actually planned out by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لِتَعَارَفُوا, so that you may be able to identify each other. Meaning what? Meaning that it only serves an earthly purpose. It does not serve any purpose in the hereafter. It does not serve any purpose for your spiritual growth. It does not serve any purpose for your intellectual growth. Right? You know, today, when we meet each other, one of the first questions that we ask each other is what? Where do you come from? Where do your parents come from? And the person says, my parents come from this place. And you say, well now I know what your history is. And I know a little bit about you and your community. Right? So that we may be able to know each other. You find that the Prophet of Allah himself identified himself as a Qurayshi. He identified himself as a part of the Banu Hashim as well. They say that in one of the battles, in the Battle of Hunayn, the Muslim community, even though the Muslim army, even though they were 12,000 in number, and their enemies were only 4,000 in number, something happened in the battlefield, and the Muslims started to run away just the way they were running away in the Battle of Uhud. So when the Prophet of Allah saw the Muslims are running away, it is said that he went up on a height, in an elevated place where everybody could see him. And then he called out to them, أَنَا النَّبِيُّ لَا كَذِبْ أَنَا ابْنُ عَبْدِ الْمُطَّلِبِ. I'm a prophet, there's no doubt about it. And he identified himself and said, I am the son of Abdul Muttalib. Okay? So when a person becomes a Muslim, it doesn't mean that they have to lose their ethnic identity. It doesn't mean that they have to lose their nationalistic identity. All right? It doesn't mean that there is a conflict between this identity and that identity. A person can be proud of their nationality. A person can be proud of their ethnicity. Right? I don't think it's any more a conversation to have whether people can have a racial or ethnic identity or not. I think the real conversation that we need to have is what is a healthy racial identity? What's a healthy nationalistic identity? So Islam teaches us, Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. That a person can be proud of their identity, but without a feeling of superiority and without a feeling of arrogance. They should not feel in their heart that their identity makes them better than another person. No identity makes you better than another person. Even labeling yourself as a Muslim does not make you better than the other person. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, Inna akramakum indallahi atqakum. The only thing that makes you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is to have taqwa, is to have iman in your heart. The first holy Imam, when he went to the city of Kufa, before the battle of Jamal, you find that the city of Kufa was an army garrison. And this army garrison was established during the time of the second Khalif. And when he established this garrison, people from different tribes and people from different ethnicities had come over there. So when the Imam reaches Kufa, he sees that the environment is ripe for racism. And therefore, one of the first khutbahs that he delivered over there is known as the khutbah of Qasi'ah, khutbah number 192. And it's a khutbah about racism. And in that khutbah, the Imam starts by talking about the first racist in history. And the first racist in history was Shaitan, right? Because he said to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Imam says, خَلَقْتَنِي مِن نَارٍ وَخَلَقْتَهُ مِن طِينٍ. Oh Allah, I am better than him. Why? Because you made me from fire and you made him from clay. My shape is better than his shape. My color is better than his color. My genes are better than his genes, for example. Right? So then the Imam says, and I quote for you, therefore he says that he is the Imamul Muta'assibin. Shaitan is the Imam of the racists, the leader of them, the leader of those who are prejudiced. وَسَلَفُ الْمُسْتَكْبِرِينَ. And he's the one who set the precedent for arrogant people who are arrogant because of their race. وَوَضَعَ أَسَاسَ الْعَصَبِيَّةِ. And he's the one who laid down the foundations of this racial prejudice. And then the Imam says, don't you see how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala belittled him when he tried to be arrogant? That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala belittled him in this world and promised him the fire of hell in the hereafter. So one, Islam says you can be proud of your race, but don't be arrogant. Two, Islam says you can be proud of your race, but don't discriminate. Don't discriminate against people because of their ethnic background. When the Prophet of Allah came to the people of Arabia, he found that they discriminated. One of the obstacles that they had towards their moral growth was racism. Because they used to say that you have to help your brother regardless of whether he is oppressive or he is not oppressive. And you can't help anybody else regardless of their being oppressed or they are not being oppressed. Right? And Islam said no. Race should not limit your moral obligations. It should not curtail your moral responsibilities. Islam says you can be proud of your race as long as you're not prejudiced. You're not biased. You're not biased towards the truth because it comes from a person of your race, and you're not opposed to the truth because it comes from a person of another race. Okay? When the Prophet of Allah came to the people of Mecca, they used to say to him that we would accept your message. And we would accept you as a prophet of God on one condition. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had sent you in one of the noble tribes or made you one of the noble people, why didn't Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make you from this tribe or from that tribe? It's very interesting when the Prophet of Allah went to the people of Medina. And during his early days in Medina, not everybody was a Muslim there. There were some people who were still non-Muslim in Medina. And they used to come to the Muslims and say, well, how can you believe in that person and how can you follow him when he's not one of us? He's a Makkan. He comes from Mecca. He's an immigrant. He is a refugee in today's terms. He is fresh off the boat in today's terms. Right? When our racial pride turns into racial prejudice, there is absolutely no room in Islam for it. Islam condemns it. When our racial pride turns into discrimination, where the struggles of other people are not important to us because they come from a different ethnicity and they come from a different race and they come from a different nationality because they're not American, because they're not Canadian, Islam says there's absolutely no space in Islam for that. That is immoral. And in Arabic, this is called asabiyya. Right? Asabiyya means prejudice. So there is a hadith from the sixth holy Imam, Al-Imam Al-Sadiq alayhi afdalu salati was salam. This is a hadith which is sahih. This hadith is narrated in the 40 hadith by Imam Khomeini rahmatullahi ta'ala alayh. And he says that I narrate this hadith from my teacher, who narrated from his teacher, who narrated from his teacher, and he takes it all the way to the sixth Imam. Okay. In this hadith, the sixth Imam says that the Prophet of Allah says, من كان في قلبه حبة من خردل من عصبية. Whoever has a mustard seed of prejudice in his heart, even that much prejudice, بعثه الله يوم القيامة مع أعراب الجاهلية. On the day of judgment, God will raise him with the people of Jahiliyyah. You know, we're told in the hadith that a person who dies without knowing the Imam of his time, then he has died the death of the people of Jahiliyyah. The hadith is also saying when a person has this kind of prejudice and racism within his heart, then on the day of judgment, God will raise him with the people of Jahiliyyah. Okay. Which brings us to the third question for today. Now, what is our moral responsibility? And how can we help people who are marginalized? How can we help black people within our societies? And people of color, whether they are Hispanics, whether they are refugees, whether they come from other countries, whether they are Chinese, how can we help them in their struggle? And we have many responsibilities. But tonight, I want to share with you 3 responsibilities. The first responsibility is the responsibility of the heart. The second responsibility is a responsibility in our own communities. And the third responsibility is our responsibility within our society at large. So our first responsibility. Let us avoid stereotyping people. And let us avoid racial stereotypes. Okay? We don't like it when somebody does it to us. Let us not do it to somebody else. Let's not do it within our community either. And we have that. Now I'm just going to mention it without mentioning any particular ethnicity. That you find generally in the American and North American Muslim community that sometimes when a person enters the mosque, immediately the first stereotype that comes to our mind is that he must be a spy. I think you know who I'm talking about as well. When another person enters the mosque, we look at the color of their skin and we may say to ourselves, this person has come to get free stuff. Or this person has come to steal something. And another person enters the masjid and we look at the color of his skin or we look at his race and we may say to ourselves that this person is not organized. He's not scheduled or structured. Even though he's an American, he's a professional, he has got a very high position in his company, but we will still apply that stereotype to that person. Another person will enter the center and will say about that person, this person is very emotional, he's very ritualistic because his community is like that. And sometimes we don't even know anything about this person. Let's not apply those racial stereotypes. I want to share with you an example from the life of the Holy Prophet. That one day the Holy Prophet, Hazrat Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alayhi wa alih, was in the masjid and a Bedouin Arab entered the masjid. Okay. The Bedouin Arab did not know about the ahkam of the masjid. He did not understand the sanctity of the masjid. And as he was sitting there listening to a khutbah from the Holy Prophet, this is mentioned in the hadith and that's why I'm mentioning it, he had to go to the washroom. So he went into the corner of the masjid and started to relieve himself, to urinate over there in the masjid. Okay? The companions of the Holy Prophet were aghast. They said, how can this person do that? And they wanted to rush at him. They wanted to go and almost attack him. And you know what the Holy Prophet said? The Prophet said, no, leave him. You know, the Prophet realized that now that he has started, it's harmful for him. You can't stop him now. This was one of the things about the Holy Prophet. Okay? He was very practical. Right? This person didn't understand, it wasn't intentional, and now there's nothing he can do about it. And when the person finished it, what did the Prophet of Allah do? And what did the Prophet of Allah not do? Okay. The Prophet of Allah did not make a big deal about it. Okay. He didn't call a whole inquisition about it. Right? We can learn something from the Holy Prophet. Sometimes things will happen in the center. They will happen in the masjid. Nobody intended it. Right? The child did something. Nobody intended it. Somebody wasn't careful. Okay, the issue arose, let's deal with it, but let's not make it the talk of the town. Right? We don't have to WhatsApp it. Yeah. The Prophet of Allah said, now that he's done it, well, tell him next time not to do it, and make it tahir, that area, and that's it, finish. But let me tell you the other thing the Prophet did not do. Because of his actions, he did not stereotype the whole Bedouin community. He didn't say from now on when they come, we need to, for example, put signs in the masjid for them. Or stop them from entering the masjid. Right? He didn't stereotype them. Let us not also stereotype in our communities. That's our responsibility. Second responsibility that we have is let us go and visit and meet and be friends with people from different ethnicities. Okay? We find that in our communities, we're very good at developing cliques and silos. And we're very comfortable in our cliques and our silos. And that is understandable, right? Because we share the same history, we share the same, same stories, so we are together. But sometimes I notice in my community and other communities that I go to, that a person will enter the masjid. And it's the first time they have come over there. And they're looking for friends. But yet they will be sitting all by themselves. And nobody will ask them. And nobody will talk to them. Or if we talk to them, it will be a very token discussion with that person. Right? And the largest community that suffers from that is the revert community. Because when they revert to Islam, we don't realize that they have had to cut off a lot of relations. And now they are relying upon the Muslim community to support them, to become their family, to become their community. And the first time they will come to the masjid, we will congratulate them and say, brother, congratulations for becoming a Muslim, the best decision that you made in your life. And after that, we won't even talk to them. We may not call them up and say, brother, do you need a ride to the masjid? This weekend, we have a family gathering. Why don't you come and join us and be with us as well? Right? We need to be able to talk to people who are outside our circle of friends. One of the beautiful adab of the Holy Prophet is that we're told the Prophet of Allah used to say salam to those who are young and those who are old. And he used to say salam to those people whom he knew and even those people whom he did not know at all. Right? He used to say salam to them. And the Prophet of Allah used to ask them and have discussions with them. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. The Prophet of Allah, you find that once he was sitting in the masjid and he recognized that somebody was missing over there. And the next day that person was missing. And the third day that person was missing. And the third day he asked, where is this person? How come I don't see them? And that person used to come and clean the masjid. She was a lady whose responsibility was come and clean the masjid. And they told him, Ya Rasulullah, she has passed away. And we buried her 3 days ago. And the Prophet of Allah was so upset. He said, why didn't you tell me 3 days ago? Then I could have gone and been a part of her burial. Maybe the Prophet didn't know her that well, but he still wanted to be a part of her burial. Right? And he still thought of her as a part of his community. Yeah? Prophet Ibrahim was known that before he had a meal, he always wanted to find somebody to have a meal with him. And sometimes he would stand out on the streets waiting for a guest to come by so that he could sit down and have a meal with them. Would it be hard for us that in the month of Ramadan, when we invite our friends for iftar, when we invite our family for iftar, that one day you go to a family in the community that maybe, you don't know them that well, they don't know you that well, your families don't hang out together, but you say to them that I would like to get to know you a little better. Let's have iftar together in the month of Ramadan. One night out of 30 nights, I think is doable, right? So the second responsibility that we have in our community is to get to know different members of our community. And our third responsibility in our society is to stand in solidarity with people who are being marginalized, with black people, to recognize their struggles, to empathize with them, and to express our solidarity with them. The Prophet of Allah teaches us that if you can't help a person with your hand and you can't help him with your wealth, then at least help him with your tongue. At least help him with your expression. Now, I want you to think about something that we do in the Muslim community. Right? That when there is a shooting in Paris, we will post a letter of condemnation. When there is a shooting in San Bernardino, we may have posted a letter of condemnation, and we should. Okay? There is a shooting in Orlando, we will come out as a community and we will condemn it. Okay? And there is a shooting in Canada, and we will come out as a community and we will condemn it. And we will say this does not represent our religion and it doesn't represent our community. Let me ask you a question. If we weren't afraid of repercussions, would we still condemn it? Okay. It goes back to asking ourselves, what is the real reason that we're condemning it? Are we condemning it because we feel that it's inhumane? We feel that it's immoral? Or are we just doing it to protect ourselves? To protect our interests? To make sure that if somebody ever came in the future and asked us, hey, did you do something about it? We can say, yes, we as a community, we condemned it. Otherwise, I ask you that when black people are going through their struggles, do we issue a letter of solidarity with them? I understand that condemning it may be difficult because sometimes the details are not available to us. Right? Sometimes it may be a very political issue for us, so I understand. But what about expressing solidarity with them? Forging alliances with them? Showing them that as a Muslim community, we support their struggles and we want to help them in their struggles as well. Sallu ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. This evening, we would like to take our hearts to Karbala to remember Ali al-Akbar. Ali al-Akbar, the son of Imam al-Hussein. He was amongst the first martyrs in Karbala. And he was loyal to the truth, and he was loyal to Imam al-Hussein. The grave of Ali al-Akbar is just at the head of Imam al-Hussein. So tonight, imagine yourself in Karbala, looking at the shrine of Aba Abdullah, and as you're looking at the grave of Ali al-Akbar, let us call out to Imam al-Hussein. Ya Aba Abdullah, Ya Hussein ibn Ali, أيها الشهيد يا ابن رسول الله، يا حجة الله على خلقه، يا سيدنا ومولانا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله، وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله، اشفع لنا عند الله، يا وجيها عند الله When I want to see the Prophet, I look at you, my son Ali. For as long as you are alive, sweetness there is in this world for me. Then slow down, Ali. Slow down, Ali. As they approached the day of Ashura, Imam al-Hussein would see dreams. Sometimes in his dreams he would see Rasulullah. Sometimes in his dreams he would see Amir al-Mu'mineen. Sometimes in his dreams he would see Lady Fatima. One day the Imam had fallen asleep. He woke up from his sleep. He said, إِنِّي رَأَيْتُ السَّاعَةَ جَدِّي مُحَمَّدًا I just saw my grandfather Rasulullah. I saw my father Amir al-Mu'mineen. I saw my mother Lady Fatima. I just saw my brother Imam al-Hassan. And they're all saying to me, عجل القدوم إلينا O Hussein, hasten your steps towards us. O Hussein, we are waiting for you. It is narrated that Lady Zainab heard this. She broke down into tears, and the Imam said to her to be patient. It was one of those days when they were going towards Karbala, when Imam al-Hussein had fallen asleep on his horse. When he woke up from his sleep, he said, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Ali al-Akbar heard that. So he came to Imam al-Hussein and he said to him, O my dear father, مِمَّا اسْتَرْجَعْتَ Why did you recite Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un? The Imam said to him, Oh my dear son, I just fell asleep, and in my dream I saw that they were horsemen and they were coming towards us, and they said that this caravan is moving forward and death is moving towards them, and I realized that they were informing us of our death. When Ali al-Akbar heard this, he turned to his father and he said, My dear father, I have one question for you. أَلَسْنَا عَلَى الْحَقِّ Are we not on the right path? Imam al-Hussein said to him, Yes, Ali al-Akbar, we are certainly on the right path. When Ali al-Akbar heard this, he said to his father, Then it doesn't matter whether we meet death or death meets us, for we shall have died on the right path. That was Ali al-Akbar on the day of Ashura. On the day of Ashura, the companions of Imam al-Hussein had gone to the battlefield. They had given their lives protecting Imam al-Hussein. And now it was the family members of al-Hussein. The first one to come to Imam al-Hussein was Ali al-Akbar. And he said, My dear father, give me permission to go to the battlefield. Imam al-Hussein had no hesitation. Imam al-Hussein immediately gave him permission to go to the battlefield. That was the spirit of al-Hussein. Before anybody gives their lives, he will send his own son to the battlefield. The narrator says, فَاسْتَأْذَنَ فَأَذِنَ لَهُ He sought permission from his father, and his father gave him permission.
So Ali al-Akbar left. But then the narrator says, Imam al-Hussein looked at his son, and his eyes were filled with despair. And he looked at Ali al-Akbar, and he said, Ya Allah, فقد برز إليهم غلام أشبه الناس برسول الله. Bear witness that a young man is going towards them who resemble most the Prophet of Allah, خلقا وخلقا ومنطقا, in his character, in his physique, and in his speech. The Imam said, Ya Allah, whenever we wanted to see Rasulullah, we would look at Ali al-Akbar. Ali al-Akbar goes to the battlefield. He fights bravely on the plains of Karbala. He kills many of the enemies of Imam al-Hussein. And then after a while he comes back to his father. And Imam al-Hussein meets him. And Ali al-Akbar says to the Imam, Al-Atashu qad qatalani wa thiqlu al-hadidi qad ajhadani. The thirst is killing me. The weight of the iron is holding me down. Oh my dear father, do you have any water for me? Imagine the heart of Imam al-Hussein. What did he feel at that time when he had no water to give to his son? So he said to Ali al-Akbar, Ya bunayya qatil qanina. My dear son, fight for a short while. Soon you shall see your grandfather Rasulullah, and he will feed you from the river of Kawthar. So Ali al-Akbar goes back to the battlefield. And when Ali al-Akbar went to the battlefield, he used to announce his presence, and he used to tell them who he was. And he said to them, Ana Ali ibn al-Husayn ibn Ali. I am Ali, the son of Hussein, the son of Ali. نحن وبيت الله أولى بالنبي. We by the house of Allah are closer to Rasulullah. This is the family of Rasulullah. These are the children of Rasulullah. This is the haram of Rasulullah. Ali al-Akbar fought bravely, but after a while, a man by the name of Munqidh ibn Murra al-Asadi, he said, if he passes by me, I will make his mother mourn for him. So he turned to Ali al-Akbar, and as he came closer to him, he took a spear and he aimed it at Ali al-Akbar, and he hit the chest of Ali al-Akbar, and Ali al-Akbar fell to the plains of Karbala, and he called out to his father, Assalamu alayka ya abata. May my salams be upon you, my father. And then Ali al-Akbar says, هذا جدي يقرئك السلام. I can see now my grandfather. I can see Amir al-Mu'mineen. He is giving you his salam. And Amir al-Mu'mineen says, عجل القدوم إلينا. Oh Hussein, hasten your steps towards us. Imam al-Hussein came to the plains of Karbala, and he reached the body of his son Ali al-Akbar. The narrator says, Al-Hussein came down from his horse. He sat next to Ali al-Akbar, and he took the head of Ali Akbar and he put it on his laps. And then the narrator says, I saw Al-Hussein putting his cheeks on the cheeks of Ali al-Akbar. And then he said, على الدنيا بعدك العفا. There is no sweetness to life after you. The narrator says, they took the body of Ali al-Akbar back towards the tent of Al-Hussein. And I saw Zainab, the daughter of Ali, coming out of her tent, running to the body of Ali al-Akbar, and she was calling out to him, Wa Habiba, Ya ibn Akha, oh my beloved, oh the son of my brother, who has done this. وسيعلم الذين ظلموا آن محمد أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. ماتم حسين يا حسين يا حسين
Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein. जवानी में मरने की हसरत किसकी ज़ईफ़ी में कांधों पे मैयत किसकी खुदा दुश्मनों को ये गम न दिखाए कभी ज़ईफ़े में ये गम कोई दिल न पाए कभी जवां की है मैयत यू दिल से लगा ले अभी जवां की है मैयत यू दिल से लगा ले अभी ये कौन आ रहा है यूं ठोकर खाए अभी बन को ये मौला की आवाज आई अंधेरा है आँखों में मजबूर बाई ये लाशा संभाले यू दिल को संभाले अभी ज़रा बच्चों बेजो के मैयत उठा ले अभी दुआ माए करती थी जिंदा रहो तुम फलो फूल आबद शाद रहो तुम यहाँ माँ दुआ में मुसल्ला बिछाए अभी वहाँ लाश बेटे की खैमे में आए अभी जवा की है मैयत यू दिल से लगा ले अभी पुकारी ए लैला मेरी जान अकबर तड़पती है रोटी बिलकती है मादर जिगर में परे है जो गम के ये चाले अभी कहो कैसे अम्माए दिल को संभाले अभी जवां की है मैयत یوں دل سے لگا لے ابھی یہ کون آ رہا ہے یوں ٹھوکر کھائے ابھی جواں کی ہے میت یوں دل سے لگا لے ابھی دشمن کو بھی خدا نہ دکھائے پسر کا داغ دل کو فغار کرتا ہے لخت جگر کا داغ آنکھوں کا نور کھوتا ہے نور نظر کا داغ مرنا جوان بیٹ کا ہے عمر بر کا داغ یہ حال ابن فاطمہ کے دل سے پوچھئے زخم جگر کے درد کو غائل سے پوچھئے یا حسین 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 یا حسین
کہاں بانو نے واویلا جواب بیٹھا گیا مارا ہے کہاں بانو نے واویلا جواب بیٹھا گیا مارا لگایا ظلم کا نیزہ جواب بیٹھا گیا مارا ہے کہاں بانو نے واویلا جواب بیٹھا کوئی کفنی منگا لاؤ گلے میں میرے پہناؤں رکھوں گی سوگ اکبر کا جواب بیٹھا گیا مارا ہے کہاں بانو واویلا جواب بیٹھا راہ کہاں بانو واویلا جواب بیٹھا غم اکبر میں روؤں گی منع کیوں کرتے ہو مجھ کو رکھوں گی جب تلک زندہ جواب بیٹھا گیا مارا ہے کہاں بانو نے واویلا جواب بیٹھا ہے کہاں بانو نے واویلا جواب بیٹھا کہاں بانو نے واویلا گیا مارا صف ماتم بچھاؤں گی، غم اکبر میں روؤں گی، کئی دن کا میرا پیاسا جواب تھا، گیا مارا ہے کہاں بانو نیوا ویلا، جواب تھا گیا مارا ہے کہاں بانو، جواب تھا گیا۔ کہو لوگوں میں کہاں جاؤں، علی اکبر کو کہاں پاؤں، گیا رن میں میرا پیاسا جواب تھا، گیا مارا ہے کہاں نیوا ویلا، جواب تھا گیا مارا ہے کہاں بانو نیوا ویلا، جواب تھا نہ خواہش مجھ کو کھانے کی، نہ خواہش پانی پینے کی، نہیں مطلب رہوں زندہ، جواب تھا گیا مارا کہاں بانو نیوا ویلا، جواب تھا مارا ہے کہاں بانو نیوا ویلا، جواب تھا۔ دعا کرتی ہوں میں رو رو، خدایا موت دے مجھ کو، نہیں جینے کی میں دکھیا، جواب تھا گیا مارا ہے کہاں بانو نیوا، جواب تھا گیا مارا ہے کہاں بانو نیوا ویلا، جواب تھا ارمان نکالوں پروان چرا لوں، ارمان نکالوں پروان لوں، ٹھہرو علی اکبر، ٹھہرو علی اکبر، تمہیں دولہا تو بنا لوں، ارمان نکالوں پروان چرا لوں، ٹھہرو علی اکبر، تمہیں دولہا تو بنا لوں، ارمان نکالوں پروان چرا لوں، ارمان نکالوں پروان، ٹھہرو علی اکبر، ٹھہرو علی اکبر، تمہیں پھل برچ کا کھائے ہوئے سوتے ہو زمیں پر، اے لال کلیجے کو میں کس طرح سنبھالوں، ارمان نکالوں پروان، ارمان نکالوں پروان نکال، ٹھہرو علی اکبر، ٹھہرو علی اکبر، تمہیں دولہا، شاید یوں تھم جائے لہوں زخم جگر کر، اٹھو علی اکبر، میں کلیجے سے لگا لوں، ارمان نکالوں پروان چرا لوں، ارمان نکالوں پروان چرا لوں، ٹھہرو علی اکبر، ٹھہرو علی آئے لال تیرے بیاہ کی زینب کو ہوس تھی، ایکھوں سر ہاتھوں میں مہندی تو لگا لوں، ارمان نکالوں پروان چرا لوں، پروان ٹھہرو علی اکبر، ٹھہرو علی اکبر، تمہیں دولہا تو بنا لوں، ارمان نکالوں پروان چرا لوں، ٹھہرو علی اکبر، تمہیں دولہا تو بنا لوں، ارمان نکالوں پروان چرا لوں، ارمان ٹھہرو علی اکبر، ٹھہرو علی اکبر، تمہیں ماہ انور لیلا، علی اکبر لیلا، نور چشمہ لیلا، ماہ انور لیلا، علی اکبر لیلا، نور چشمہ لیلا، ماہ علی اکبر لیلا، نور چشمہ لیلا، ماہ انور لیلا، علی اکبر لیلا، نور چشمہ، تیری شادی رچاؤں، تجھے دولہا بناؤں، یہی امید لیلا، علی اکبر لیلا، نور چشمہ لیلا، ماہ علی اکبر لیلا، نور تجھے مہندی لگاؤں، دلہن شادی میں لاؤں، یہی درد ہے لیلا، علی اکبر لیلا، نور چشمہ انوار لیلا، علی اکبر لیلا، نور چشمہ لیلا، لیلا میری گود کا پالا، لگا ظلم کا بالا، یہی درد ہے لیلا، علی اکبر لیلا، نور چشمہ لیلا، ماہ انوار لیلا، علی اکبر لیلا، نور ماہ میرے گھر کا اجالا، میرے نازوں کا پالا، دل جان ہے لیلا، علی اکبر لیلا، نور چشمہ لیلا، ماہ انوار لیلا، علی اکبر لیلا، نور چشمہ لیلا، تیری شادی رچاؤں، تجھے دولہا بناؤں، یہی امید لیلا، علی اکبر لیلا، لیلا، علی اکبر کربلا اکبر میرا ہے نوجوان، کربلا اکبر نوجوان، نوجوان، کربلا میرا ہے نوجوان، کربلا اکبر میں نوجوان، قید و سغرا سے علی اکبر سے آ کے ملے، میرے ارمانوں کا مٹتا ہے جہاں، کربلا اکبر میرا ہے نوجوان، کربلا اکبر نوجوان، 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 کربلا میرا ہے نوجوان، موت کی ہچکی سے کہہ دو ٹھہر جا، ٹھہر جا، دولہا اکبر کو بنا لے اس کی ماں کربلا اکبر میرا ہے نوجوان کربلا اکبر میرا ہے نوجوان 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 کربلا اکبر میرا نوجوان یا الہی یہ جواں کا داغ ہے خاک میں ملتا ہے یہ ارمان میرا کربلا اکبر میرا ہے نوجوان کربلا اکبر میرا نوجوان 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 کربلا میرا ہے نوجوان ماں کی تھی امید بیٹا دیکھ لوں دولہا تجھے ورنہ آئے دل کے یہ ارمان میرا کربلا اکبر میرا ہے نوجوان کربلا اکبر میرا ہے نوجوان 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 کربلا اکبر میرا ہے نوجوان زندگی ہے خاک بیٹا کیا کرے اب جی کے ماں سر پہ واری ہے نہ ہے اکبر جوان کربلا اکبر میرا ہے نوجوان
کربلا اکبر میرا ہے نوجوان کربلا اکبر میرا ہے نوجوان 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 کربلا اکبر میرا ہے نوجوان یا حسین 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 لا رہا ہوں میں لاش اکبر پر لا رہا ہوں میں لاش اکبر ام لیلا سنبھال زینب کو لا رہا ہوں میں لاش اکبر لا رہا ہوں میں لاش میں لیلا سنبھال زینب کو لا رہا ہوں میں لاش اکبر لا رہا ہوں میں لاش اکبر بولے ہوں گے حسین یہ رو کر ام لیلا سنبھال زینب کو لا رہا ہوں میں لاش اکبر لا رہا ہوں میں لاش اکبر لیلا سنبھال زینب نوجوان لاش لاش ہے ضعیفی ہے، میری نظروں سے دیکھ منظر کو، کیسے ہم شیر کو سنبھالوں گا، میں سنبھالے ہوئے ہوں اکبر کو، تیرا احسان ہوگا یہ مجھ پر، ام لیلا سنبھال زینب کو، لا رہا ہوں میں لاش اکبر، لا رہا ہوں میں لاش اس کے سینے سے کہ نام علی، میں نے برچی ابھی نکالی ہے، انتہا دے چکی ہے میری، اب تیری بے کسی کی باری ہے، تو بھی اس وقت یا علی کہہ کر ام لیلا سنبھال زینب کو، لا رہا ہوں میں لاش اکبر، لا رہا ہوں دو نگینے تھے اس کی جھولی میں، دونوں اکبر پہ کر دیے صدقہ، صبر ایسا کہ اپنے بیٹوں پر ہے، مگر اب اسے نہیں دیکھا ہے، مگر اب یہ لاش اکبر ہے، ہوں میں لاش اکبر، ام لیلا سنبھال زینب کو، ہوں میں لاش اکبر، لا رہا کیسے لاش جوان اٹھائے ہوں، ایڑیاں خط بناتی آتی ہے، ان نشانوں کو پیچھے پیچھے میرے اماں زہرا مٹاتی آتی ہے، اس کی نظریں نہ دیکھے یہ منظر، اس کی نظریں نہ دیکھے یہ منظر، ام لیلا سنبھال زینب کو، لا رہا ہوں میں لاش اکبر، لا رہا ہوں میں لاش اکبر، ام لیلا سنبھال زینب کو، یا حسین یا حسین
يا حسين يا سيدي يا عباس يا أبو الفضل العباس، للعباس يا سيدي يا عباس يا أبو الفضل العباس، فضل العباس الأمدار الأمدار يا أبو الفضل العباس، العباس مشك سكينة چيني يا أبو الفضل العباس، العباس سكينة کا چاچا جان يا أبو الفضل العباس، العباس اللطاش اللطاش يا أبو الفضل العباس، العباس يا سيدي يا عباس يا أبو الفضل العباس، أبا حسين شهيد كربلاء وويلا، وويلا حسين شهيد كربلاء وويلا، وويلا عباس يا الأمدارم تشد وويلا، وويلا أكبر نوجوان تشد وويلا، ويلا أكبر نوجوان شد وويلا وويلا أكبر نوجوان شد وويلا 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 لا يا حسين وويلا لا يا مظلوم وويلا ويلا يا حسين وويلا ويلا يا حسين 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 محمد وآل محمد صلوات. السلام عليك يا رسول الله. السلام عليك يا خديجة الكبرى. السلام عليك يا علي المرتضى. السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء. السلام عليك يا حسن المجتبى. السلام عليك يا حسين الشهيد من الشهيد. السلام عليك يا علي زين العابدين. السلام عليك يا محمد الباقر. السلام عليك يا جعفر الصادق. السلام عليك يا موسى القادم. السلام عليك يا علي الرضا. السلام عليك يا محمد تقي. السلام عليك يا علي النقي. السلام عليك يا حسن العسكري ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا صاحب العصر والزمان. الأمان الأمان الأمان. السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن. السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن. السلام عليك يا كعبة الإيمان. السلام عليك يا إمامنا وإمام الإنس والجان. عجل الله لك ما وعدك من الناس وظهور الأمن ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل الساعة وليا وحافظا وقاعدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك توعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.
نعرة حيدري.